like so many of you, I am enthralled with entrepreneurship, with startups. I love creating stuff from nothing, as I'm sure most of you do, if not all of you. And I like the idea that you kind of have the future in your hands. That's like part of it. You can create something of value, right? You can build something. You can grow teams. You can have an impact on your community. There's so much about entrepreneurship I just love, and I've always loved it. And I think we're kind of in this kind of interesting moment in our entrepreneurial the world, the world's in an interesting moment where a combination of technology, uh, availability, even opportunities to raise money and make money. These things are becoming a lot more accessible in different ways. It's becoming certainly easier than ever to just vibe code your way to building stuff. I mean, so building stuff that shelf has decreased quite a bit. I don't mean necessarily quality stuff. That's a whole other story. But a lot of the barriers to entry are really falling away, and I think it's having possible impacts on entrepreneurship itself. So if you can see here, and by the way, I am so meme. For those of you that follow me, I just love memes. So there's gonna be like meme images and meme graphics, animations throughout this whole thing because I think it's kind of nice. I don't take myself too seriously either. I think that's an important thing. I like to laugh at other things and myself all the time. But so you'll see this here. I think we're like, this is sort of like the Back to the Future reference here, precisely on schedule. I think things are coming at this moment. So I crossed out the future of startups. I'll talk a little bit about the now of micro teams. I'm like, what the heck is that all about? And you might probably think I'm totally crazy. And I'm used to that because, well, you'll see this in my history. I'm used to kind of coming at things early and being a little crazy, having some really good successes and some, not so good successes. So let's get into that. Like, how did I get here? You may or may not know that there's a Wikipedia entry with me and my co-founder from the first company that we started in 1994. There's a Wikipedia page called List of Websites Founded Before 1995. So because there's so few websites that were even around before 1995 that they have the full list of all the websites that were around of note before 1995. And ours was a company called Virtumall, which was one of the first companies to actually develop e-commerce when people actually thought we were crazy. I don't know how many of you were using the internet in like the early 90s, but there was no way to charge a credit card. We were on HTML 1.0. So we had like, I don't even know if we had tables, let alone we didn't have divs. That was like a huge innovation much later. There was no SSL, so there's no security. Nobody trusted putting a credit card number into a form. They're like, this is crazy. No one will do it. So we came up with like a really kind of crazy idea, which was that, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build these websites for commerce companies, but we're going to go to mail order retailers and we're going to tell them, hey, we'll just look at the number of pages you have in your mail order catalog. We'll charge you by the page, and we'll do the image. You give us the catalog. We'll digitize the images. We'll build the website for you. And then what we'll do is when somebody fills out the payment form, what we would do is we would fax. We would generate an order form and we would fax it to their mail order department. And their mail order department would process the credit card as if it was a mail order. And it was kind of ingenious because we didn't need to have an e-commerce infrastructure. We didn't even need to process the orders. We didn't do anything. And the other side was like, oh, we already have an infrastructure for handling mail order. So it kind of worked. The whole model, when people realized you can actually do whole transactions online, that whole thing went away. But for like the first 2 years, we were like these crazy kids. We were kids out of MIT who had no idea what the hell we were doing. We didn't know anything about funding. We didn't know anything about anything. And yeah, this is this little ad. I don't know if you could see it, but basically this is like this ad we put in a magazine that says, the information age has arrived. Don't let your business become extinct. Call 1-800. That's right. Back when 1-800 numbers were big, call 1-800-VMall96, Virtumall. That was the name of it. And well, we got a lot of attention. One of the people that we got attention from, because we were MIT dorks, was a guy by the name of Brad Feld. Some of you may know. He was a really early angel investor. And he's like, oh, you guys are cool and interesting. You just have no idea what the hell you're doing. So let me come in. I'm gonna help you out. So what happened was, of course, the internet bubble just became ginormous. I kind of knew it at the time. It wasn't much of a secret. We all knew that the internet was happening. It just nobody knew kind of how it was happening. And so we raised all the venture capital kind of got into it, and well, you could see what happened here. First of all, the Brad Feld, we raised about $1 million to start, and then their investors were like, "You guys need parental supervision." That's basically what they said. So you, Ron, become like the CTO. I will get like a real CEO. Like, I won't take it the wrong way. Okay, but I know what you're saying. I actually gave myself a weird title. I called myself the Apostle of Partners, and that got me into Fast Company, which is back when I had a little hair, and then no, at least on the top of my head, not on the front. So that's what I looked like. And then you could see here the internet, the dot-com boom went crazy, and we just were raising money after money. This last one was like our 26 million. That was one round. So we had a $23 million. You could see here in the small text, we had a $23.5 million round. And then before that, we had a $6.5 million round. And before that, we had a $1 million round. And then we were acquired by ClickCommerce, a publicly traded company. So that's like, hey, that was like, we were like one of those .com, examples of like the success story. It's a little arrow. So it's like, we raised lots of money and we exited. And so you might think, ooh, that's like a nice part of the story. I'm like, yeah, but the .com crash happened after that, and things got a lot harder. And also, let me tell you, when you raise that much money, most of the exit goes where? It goes to the investors. Like, that's the thing. It's like, bless you. What people don't really will tell you is that it's like when someone's raising 100 million or 500 million, it's not like the founders are going to miraculously get more money. No, of course you get diluted. And also there are these things called preferences, which basically means that the investors are the first ones to get their money out when there's an acquisition. And then it kind of trickles down from there. And sometimes if you're unlucky, these preferences can have multiples where it's like they get a guaranteed 2 times their money back before everybody gets their money. And then in the end, you're like, wait a second, we got acquired. Why do I have so few pennies in my hand here now? It's just crazy. This is sort of the math of startup investment, which I'm going to come back to a little bit because it's the sort of the story kind of comes around a little bit. So part 2, okay, I was on my own. .com crash happened. You couldn't raise money even if you wanted to. If this is like 2002, 2003. And this is also a story I tell people in the AI age, because we're like in this AI age and it looks like all this crazy stuff is happening. I'm like, this reminds me a lot of the internet in the 1990s. And if you think about it, who were the big companies in 1996 or 97, 98, the peak years? It wasn't Google, because Google wasn't even founded until 1998. Definitely wasn't YouTube, because they were founded in 2005. It wasn't Facebook. They were founded in 2004. It was Yahoo, AOL, Pets.com, Webvan. I mean, these were the people were talking about companies like that were like in the media industry. It's like these were the leaders of the internet. The .com crash happened, and then like all the winners that we see now came post .com crash. So you have to think about that. So the reason why I bring that up is that I'm like, okay, well, I can't raise any money. But I love entrepreneurship. So I started an analyst firm covering the market of XML, web services. Some of you may be familiar with that. The reason why I did that is because after I left, I talked to the old CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at ChannelWave, which was the company. So he saw that Virtumall changed its name. It became ChannelWave, and that's what got acquired during that round. And I talked to the CMO of ChannelWave, and I'm like, where are you spending money? She's like, oh, I'm spending all this money with analysts. I'm like, analysts? What the hell is an analyst? They're like, oh, Gartner, Forrester, IDC. Like, what do they do? It's like, well, I tell them stuff and they write what I tell them and I pay them money to do that. I'm like, that sounds like a racket. I need to be in that business. So that's exactly what happened. I'm like, so I decided to get into the analyst business and started a firm called ZapThink, which probably many of you might not have ever heard of, which is perfectly fine because it was me and one person. It was me and Jason Bloomberg. And we were sitting there just writing about, in this case, enterprise software. We were just also, if you remember, the other big thing that was happening at around the .com, what was the other big thing happening at the end of the 1990s? The Y2K situation. Remember that? Well, Y2K plus .com basically convinced all these big companies they need to reinvest in their IT infrastructure, because their IT infrastructure, if they can't handle 4-digit dates, they got some problems, right? So they just decided, okay, that's when they reinvested in their ERP and the CRM. That's what really was that huge wave. It came post Y2K, post.com. And so we were covering that. We're like, oh, we see this movement happening in enterprise software. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about integration. It was a great business. We made a lot of money. We didn't take any money. We didn't take any investment. It was like an 80% margin business. We grew it to several $1 million, and we sold it. You could see logo on the left, logo on the right. Logo on the left was us as independent ZapThink. Logo on the right was us being acquired by Dovell Technologies, which is a government contractor, which they got acquired by Guidehouse, and then I think Guidehouse got acquired by somebody. I don't know. The whole thing's kind of a big racket. So like the previous one raised all this money and exited. The second one, I didn't raise any money. We didn't pivot. We didn't pivot at all. Like before, it was like Virtumall, then became VirtuFlex, then it became ChannelWave, and I had to hire a CEO when we had 250 employees, and I had a chief marketing officer, and blah, blah, blah. I had, like, when I founded ZapThink in 2001, it was 2 people. When I sold it in 2011, it was 2 people. Can you guess which one was the more financially worthwhile of the 2? Yeah, this one. This didn't raise a penny, made a whole lot more money. It was fun the whole way. I never lost control. I never had to pivot to some crazy thing because the CEO wanted to make a box. The Silicon Valley reference. So like, anyway, that's what happened. So I'm like, it was a very different entrepreneurial experience for me. So then, okay, post sold ZapThink, and I'm thinking, okay, I need to do something else. So I had this crazy idea for baseball caps. Wow, that was a crazy idea. That did not work out at all. I am not an apparel kind of person, but it was this idea of baseball caps with crazy shaped brims. Do you see that? Like I have a crimped brim and a curled brim and a bent brim. I'm like, because people like baseball caps were hot like in 2009, 10, 11. I thought, well, people are innovating. The only thing they haven't innovated was the brim. So let me go ahead and innovate the brim. I patented it, did design patents, did worldwide patents. Yeah, that was a lot of money out the door. Didn't go anywhere. So what happened was, hey, if you still like it, we could talk. But so that kind of didn't go anywhere. So I was pivoting. I was, I'm like, this didn't work. So I created a software company called Bezzello. Some of you may or may not recognize that name, which was really focused on small business software, because the problems that I was having in making the hats were a lot of, I'm a small business, but I need an ERP, and an inventory management. I need supply chain management. I need to handle procurement, because I was doing like physical products, and I was definitely not going to get SAP. No Microsoft Dynamics or any of that stuff. Very expensive, too complicated. I didn't know how to set it up. So I was going to create this idea of these microservices, which was based on the ZapThink stuff we were covering anyways. And so I created a software company called Bezzello. But here's the story. I was in Boston. I was in Cambridge. Actually, I was in Waltham, Massachusetts, just where I was living. And I moved. I met my wife up there. She was a medical illustrator at Leahy Clinic. And then she got offered a teaching position, a professorship at Johns Hopkins University. So we're like, okay. She's like, can we move? I'm like, sure, why not? I got nothing. I sold my company. Let's move. So we moved from Boston to Baltimore, and we were set up shop in Roland Park. And I'm like, great. I'm trying to build this software company now. And I'm like, is there like a tech ecosystem in Baltimore? I didn't know. So what I created was, like, while I was doing the software company, was the side thing called TechBreakfast, which was just an idea like, let's just get the tech scene together. And the rule was, for those of you who are at TechBreakfast, you remember this and you know this, and I have a soft spot in my heart for TechBreakfast. I know a lot of people do. There's a lot of love there for it. The idea was that it's like, it wasn't for pitching, it was for demoing. So the idea was, you would come in the morning, the rule 8 to 10 a.m. And the rule was, you have 7 minutes, show and tell, no PowerPoint. Yeah, I'm here for you, my friend Terrence. So yeah, I mean, that was the rule. And you know what? That format actually really worked, because you got to see what people were working on. And if you could demo it, then you could talk about it, because it was really easy to fake things in PowerPoint or talk about blah, blah, blah. But like when you're seeing something, or it might even be physical, people brought their like mowing robots, and people, I remember Traxel came with their fiber laying thing. It was really cool. I mean, who doesn't love a show and tell? I mean, show and tell is awesome. And it was free to attend and it was free to present. You're like, well, how the heck was that a business? Well, sponsors. And the sponsors loved it because we were getting something like 100, 200 people at the Baltimore Tech Breakfast. That's right, Baltimore Tech Breakfast at DLA Piper's headquarters, when they had a nice headquarters up in closer to the north side of Baltimore in that beautiful glass building. We would have 200 people there every month. It was a monthly event. And what happened was Baltimore Tech Breakfast became Columbia Tech Breakfast second. So we had two locations. I don't remember her name. She brought us, she was the old Howard County Economic Development Agency that she brought us over. It's fantastic. And then we decided, oh, like, let's do one in DC because we got some support from the Washington, DC Economic Partnership. So we get a third location. Oh, let's also do one in Northern Virginia. Soon I was running 4 a month. Keep in mind, this was a side thing. This wasn't even my main, Bizzello was still my main idea. It's the software company. I was just like, I'll do this on the side. The first like batch for like the first year, I was paying for bagels and coffee for everybody. And then we're like, well, I don't need to pay for bagels and coffee. The law firms will sponsor it. Then the economic development agencies would sponsor it. Then these tech companies would sponsor it. Then these recruiting firms would sponsor it. Soon enough, I was running 12 monthly tech breakfast events all over the country. I was in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware, Baltimore, Columbia, DC, Northern Virginia, Raleigh, Durham, Austin, Texas, and Silicon Valley. The funny thing is I would do this every month in all of those locations. The one location that actually didn't do well, surprise, surprise, was Silicon Valley. And the reason why I didn't do well there is because people didn't need a demo scene. There already was one. You can go to any coffee shop and get demos all you want. But also the real reason is that nobody there wakes up before 10 a.m. That was the real reason. It's like, they're like, well, if this was in the evening, we'd do it. I'm like, well, I can't call it tech breakfast then. I mean, I could do like breakfast at night. I tried that. It didn't work. So it didn't really make, so here's the weird part. Tech Breakfast ended up making a ton of money. For those of you that didn't know that, Tech Breakfast at its peak when we had 12 locations was doing about $500,000 a year in about, not ginormous amounts of money, but $500,000 a year with, again, a 70% margin. That's including all my costs. And remember, nobody was paying anything. Terrence, right? It was free the whole time. We never charged a single ticket price to come and attend. And we didn't charge for presenters either. So that model worked. So it ended up, it's like, whatever happened to Tech Breakfast? Well, we didn't have an exit. Why didn't Tech Breakfast continue? Well, there's a couple things that basically were kind of like the indicators that something wasn't quite right. As we were getting closer and closer to 2018, oh, by the way, the peak years for Tech Breakfast, we were running the demo event series for South by Southwest. And we had done that from 2014 all the way until the pandemic. We were running the biggest demo event at South by Southwest. And at our peak, because we were doing Austin Tech Breakfast, and then the South by Southwest folks said, hey, you got a great little demo thing going. We're like, do you want to do it at South by? We're like, absolutely. Just give us a place to do it. And of course, let us make money on sponsorship. And we fed like in the peak year 2016 or 2017, we fed 5,200 people breakfast tacos. We didn't charge anybody anything. The sponsors paid for that. So it's fantastic. And but what was happening at around 2018 was that the tide was turning a little bit on startups, and everything was becoming AI. That was like the big thing that was happening in 2018. Like it became pretty obvious that all startups are becoming AI startups, and we had to do something about it. So what happened was that Kathleen Walsh, who was like my conspirator a bit, she came in late to Tech Breakfast, but I was getting her help to help me run and expand it because doing 12 locations monthly was crazy. We were like, let's I'm going to go back to my analyst roots at like ZapThink, and we're going to create a new analyst firm focused on AI while the Tech Breakfast thing is going on. And it's kind of good that we did that. So we basically Tech Breakfast just kind of fizzled out, for long story short. And the pandemic honestly would have killed it altogether. But the real big issue was that the venues stopped wanting to host us. They started to want to charge a lot more for it. The sponsors were starting to pull back a little bit. And we're like, we don't want to introduce a ticket price. I didn't want to charge people for it. We could have. There were some other mistakes that we made, but that's really what ended up happening. Could you do Tech Breakfast again? The answer is maybe, but I think the world has changed, and you need to sort of, it's hard to bring the past back. As much as people have so much love for Tech Breakfast, it's, there's new eras deserve new things. So that's that. So this pivot really was to this thing called Cognilytica, which was a research advisory and education firm focused on AI. I'm like, okay, we're going to do the AI looks hot. This was 2017, 2018. Of course, now it's obvious, right? AI looks hot. What we need to do is create information for enterprises, businesses who are looking to leverage AI and don't know how to structure their organization, how to actually implement the technology, how to even run projects. And what ended up happening was we made money the hard way. This was sort of like these were the hardest dollars I've ever made, because it was sort of making enterprise sales. We didn't raise the money. It was just the two of us, me and Kathleen. We had a podcast called AI Today, which some of you may have listened to as well. And, we were getting we had 80,000 monthly downloads on that. Things were going well, but we were definitely making money the hard way. I mean, I was basically making more money than TechBreakfast, but TechBreakfast money was a lot easier. Only if we do it that way. It's a lot more. We had to do a lot more work for this money. And what ended up happening is we produced the most successful product we had was a training product, a certification on running and managing AI projects with a methodology called CPMI. The Project Management Institute took a look at that and said, hey, I don't know if you guys know PMI. They're the ones that do the PMP certification, project management professional. They do a bunch of, they're like a certification company basically, and they have a big membership, 1.5 something million PMP certified, 700 and something thousand active members all over the world. They said, we want your cert. And I'm like, okay, make us an offer. And they did. You can see the logo. That's what happened. We became PMI Cognilytica, and Kathleen is still there, by the way. That's where she ended up. She's probably happy to stay there. And I'm like, that's perfectly fine. And I'm not. There's a reason for that too, right? So so that was sort of like it's like a third experience. It was like a third entrepreneurial experience. Plus, of course, all the failures that I had, right? Some were pretty expensive failures too. So kind of like, what did we learn? Like, what did I learn from all of this? And while this was going on, I was very involved with the whole startup ecosystems, all the startup ecosystems. Because you remember, I wasn't just doing Maryland and here in Baltimore and DC and in the Columbia, Maryland and Frederick and all these locations. Even Anne Arundel County, we did some special Tech Breakfast events there. I was also in the New York scene because I did New York Tech Breakfast. I was in the Boston scene because I did the Boston Tech Breakfast. I was in the Raleigh-Durham, the Triangle scene, and the Austin scene, and the Silicon Valley scene. And what I learned was that entrepreneurship and small business and startups are not the same. I'm sure you all know this, but like, this really grounded me like, well, there's like a way of thinking. Startups is not just entrepreneurship. It's a particular mindset. It's like a mind frame, right? Small business, which is basically what ZapThink was, right? So Cognilytica, it's not Cognilytica, ChannelWave, the first business, Virtumall, ChannelWave, that was like a venture-backed startup. That was like as startupism as startups were. The second business was ZapThink, which was the analyst firm, which I made all that money and we sold. That was a small business. I mean, it was a very profitable small business, but it was a small business. We never grew. And the last one, Cognilytica, was sort of this kind of weird halfway mode. We didn't raise any money. I was, going after a much higher scale, and they just were all very different. And it's not like one was better than the other. They were just different. And because of that, it sort of really colored my vision on a lot of that. And also being involved in all these startup scenes, I'm like, okay, there's something going on with entrepreneurship in and of itself beyond just the companies, right? There's something going on with venture capital. I think had sort of like, there was like a change that happened around like the venture capital that invested in the first company, ChannelWave, was not the same kind of venture capital that's investing now. Like there was like a mentality change in and of itself. I think it was past the 2007, 2008 recession is when VC changed to be much more of a money game and less of a let's build companies game, if you want to think of it that way. So the other big thing that's happening is that a lot of companies are saying, big organizations and startups and tech companies are saying, hey, we can afford to do more with less. We can get rid of people. We don't need all these people. We're going to use AI. We're going to use automation. And I think my personal opinion on this, I'd love to hear all of yours opinions, is that I think organizations, even startups, have started to treat people and employees like disposable resources. We will hire, when in 2021, I don't know if you remember this, there was a massive hiring boom. It was like the post-pandemic hiring boom, and these companies could not hire. They were like throwing money. They were hiring everybody. And then 2024 happened. They're like, oh, AI's here. Boom. They just got rid of everybody. It's like, what was that all about? Like, what was that all about? Are these people really truly disposable? That they're just like here to fill some temporary need and then gone? It's like, this is crazy. So my thought is, okay, well, two can play out this game. If the big companies can do more with less, so can small companies. And I think this is where I think the tide is changing, that maybe being large right now, raising a ton of money, hyperscaling, maybe that's not necessarily the best path to growth. Maybe there's another way. And you might think I'm crazy, but I'm used to it because that's sort of been my life anyway. So I'll tell you a little bit about my crazy here, and let's share, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I want to introduce a new word into our vocabulary, because I couldn't really find a good word, because I didn't want to call, what do you call small companies that want to intentionally stay lean, but scale like a hyper-funded startup, but not scale in the way that they scale, which is by throwing a lot of people at just hiring a ton of people, right? Or just by trying to dominate a market by sheer brute force, which is what they try to do. And I didn't want to call it a startup. I didn't want to call it a small business. Solopreneurship was too limiting. Entrepreneurship was too general. So I came up with this term that I started using called a micro team. So a micro team, by its word, is intentionally a small group of people but it's built for exponential scale. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the rules of the manifesto, if you will, of the micro team, and some of the rules of scaling when you're trying to stay intentionally lean. I don't want to say small. I just want to stay lean. And you might say, well, we've done this before with lean and agile and all this sorts of adaptive. I'm like, well, it's mentality. It's a lot of this is just mentality. It's not the specifics of it. It's just like how you go about thinking about things. So this idea of being small in size, but you want to be mighty in impact. And we want to use all the same tools that the big companies are using, AI, systems, but we want to use the same tools that small businesses use, which is community leverage, teamwork, all of us getting together so that we can basically effectively compete as a tiny organization with much bigger organizations, and honestly, even bigger funded organizations, and be successful. And I would say there's proof points that this might actually be working right now. So, and feel free to comment and interrupt. I'm here for you all. As mentioned, it's not a podcast. So, I like to think of this mentality of startups as an ism. I like to think of it as startup-ism. It's like and I'll show you why I think of it as an ism. But the idea of startup-ism is very much investor and investment focused. You might think, no, it's about starting companies. I'm like, I think a lot of startup-ism is about raising money and working with investors and seed and pre-seed and Series A and Series B and Series. I'm like, where's the customers? Where's the value? Oh, we'll worry about that later. There's that famous scene in Silicon Valley. It's like, whoa, stop talking about revenue, because the moment you start talking about revenue, people will say it's not enough. So you're better off to be pre-revenue. I'm like, okay. It's definitely startupism is a mindset. It's about raising money. A lot of times it's about faking it till you make it. Basically, that means giving the impressions that you've accomplished something before you've actually accomplished it. There's nothing wrong with it, but that is part of that ism, right? Blitz scaling, if you've heard about that. Growth at all costs. Sometimes just throw money at it, throw people at it, throw resources at it until you win, until you dominate. There's a lot of zero-sum mentality, which is, it's like, it's the power law. Like the first ones in, the first dominators, they take most of the market. The number two takes like half of that. The number three takes half of that. There's that. There's not a lot of consideration for employees. A lot of times when startups do exit, they benefit first and foremost the investors, second the founders, and maybe some of the early employees, and everybody else usually gets screwed. I mean, that's just what happens. Even on big acquisitions, most of the team that they bring in, they're either getting bonuses at the new company or some job offer, something like that. But most of the other people kind of get screwed in an acquisition or an exit. And so I like to think of a lot of startupism, like this ism of startups, as a financial hustle. When I see people saying, oh, we're raising money. I'm like, well, what you're really doing is that your product doesn't matter. Your product is the company. Like the equity in the company, that is the product. And what investors are investing is they're not investing in the company in terms of your outputs, in terms of your product. They're investing in the company as an ownership of your shares, and they want that ownership to be worth more. Doesn't matter what you produce or if you produce anything. Really great proof point of this. Well, I'll get into this later. I'll talk about the really good proof point. Hold it for later. Where I think there's an intentionality with it, micro teams, which is that we're trying to stay lean. We're not trying to grow for growth's sake. We're not trying to grow through brute force. There's a new term, another term that I'm phrasing called scale maxing, which definitely my kids they think I'm so cringe when I say it, which is this idea of trying, like, how much can we really scale before we need to add more team members or do something like that. Every employee, because you're scale maxing, every member of the team is hypercritical. It's not, nobody is disposable, because it kind of goes against the rule. If somebody is disposable, that means that they're not critical. And if they're not critical in this current age, then you can just use automation. So that means everybody must be critical. And every time you add somebody new, they're like adding some major criticality to it because they're so important. So there's no such thing as disposable employees. I also like to say it's bots over bros. There's a lot of bro activity in the startupism world because it's a financial hustle. I mean, and it's like for them, it's like start a startup, do a crypto thing, do an NFT. It's all the same. It's like all the same. Start, flip, launch. In, I'm out. For them, they'll make a ton of money and then they'll move on to something else. And it may not even be entrepreneurship. It may be like, let's buy a media company or some crazy stuff like that.
So Ron, then scale maxing isn't so much about the scale in terms of growing a size. It's about growing the efficiency, the effectiveness, the efficacy of each and every person who's in that team, the bros.
Exactly.
Oh,
So
that's a great new term. That's a great new term.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce some new ideas. We'll see if it catches on. But like, it's good because there's not a lot of Google traffic on it, so we can create some mind share here. But anyway, the likelihood of success for everything is always low. I mean, it's hard to be successful. It's like it's sort of a rule, right? If everybody was successful, then nobody would be successful, because how can you be successful if everybody's successful? So the only way to be successful is it has to be rare. So the question is you and I, we all know a bunch of startups that have been really successful, but I know a whole lot more that haven't. And so the question is the likelihood of success, as low as it is, greater when you have a small team that hasn't raised a ton of money that can basically afford to focus versus one that isn't? I think so. So let me get into this a little bit. You might be thinking, when I present this, sometimes I talk to people, oh my God, like they hate me when I say this, like, you don't know how tech works. You don't know how startups work. I get that. I really do get that a lot. And I'm like, okay, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the hyper growth strategy of being a startup, and that works for certain things. But maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a third way, right? You might think, well, why is it a third way? Well, because the second way is the traditional small business. Which feels like, well, it's either you're doing a startup or a small business. I'm like, maybe there's a third way. The small businesses, you think of the restaurant, you think of the laundromat, or you think of the consulting company, or you think of the small integration firm, or you think of even the government contractor. Small businesses can start to become larger. There's nothing says you have to be a one-person shop, but of course, solopreneurs, side hustle folks. Again, this is not about size. This is about mindset. So for me, the small business mindset is that you're trying to build something that's a good source of income, and you're focusing on stability, and you're focusing on, you're going to grow, but not grow at all costs, because you don't want to risk the stability. You would much rather stay in business for 20, 30 years, make a good living, have a good team, than bet it all on something and it's either go or no go, with the odds of no go being really high. So the idea of a small business mentality is not excessive scale, stability, growth by profit, managing cash flow, keeping the scale limited. So you do want to grow, but it's sustainable growth, basically. And it's the idea is that also in a small business, you're very much community. You can be community focused. You could think, oh, I got a consulting firm, but I'm going to develop relationships that are in my community. I'll say for the locals, I'm thinking, Mind Grub is like, in my mind, like a local small business, even though he may or may not think of himself that way. That's, to me, it's like that, or a government contracting, whatever it is, right? accessible. Also, I think about when people think startups, a lot of people think, I can't do a startup. I can't be a startup. I can't raise money. I can't do the hustle. But when they think small business, they're like, oh, I could do that. Small business, I could do a small business, a consulting firm, a contracting. I can do. So it's, again, a mindset. Well, why is it they think they can do one and not the other? The success rate's probably higher than small business, but also it's because they feel like the mechanism of small business is accessible to them. So I'm thinking, okay, why can't we have the same accessibility in a micro team? That doesn't mean you can't scale. So there's this idea called seed strapping. I didn't come up with that word. Some of you may or may not heard about it, but seed strapping is the idea of combining a small amount of seed money with bootstrapping. So you basically raise only enough money to get you to a scale point, but then the idea is not to continue to raise. The idea is to say, okay, we have our investors, we have our customers, let's grow. And we're going to scale as if we are a large company, but we're going to use this lean team, right, Patrick, who just said, like, we're going to use the lean team, we're going to automate it with technology. The scale is potentially actually unlimited. And I'll show examples of that. The focus, we're trying to grow. The focus is growth versus stability. We are trying to grow. But just like a small business, we want sustainable growth, not growth at all costs. And we want efficient growth. That's the thing. We're really focusing on efficiency. We want to squeeze like every bit of capability out of every person that we have to grow this thing to the max. So I think it's accessible too. I think it's just as accessible as being a small business, but people just don't know how to do it. All right, this is good stuff. All right, so again, when I talk about this, people say, okay, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. The more you talk, the more of idiot you sound. But like this meme. And I'm like, okay, let's give some examples of this. I'm not the only ones coming. I'm seeing memes all over the place where people are already kind of pooping on the whole startup scene. People are kind of turning a little bit against the venture capital. One, because they don't like the bros, just to be honest. It's not venture capital they hate. They just don't like people like Elon Musk. They don't like these tech bros who they feel like have all this power, and they feel like VC is kind of enabling that. And people are saying, oh, look, it's VC fundraising versus you're not actually building a business. You're just creating this financial hustle. You're raising all this money. You're not actually doing anything. Okay, all right. And there's also more of the reason why I say that startup is an ism is there actually really is a mentality on startups. It's like this in-group. Somebody put this graphic together and it's like, yeah, these are all the things that startupism people say. Oh, FANG, founder mode, Bay Area, pre-seed, fintech, we're the Uber of X, and focusing on generative AI and like looking at Y Combinator and reading Paul Graham essays and reading the books 0 to 1 and the lean startup. It's like a, I don't want to call it a cult. It's a community. It's a mindset. Right? That's what I'm saying. It's a mindset because people have this sort of, there's like a little bit of group think that's coming into it. And I think it's also, to be told, and we all feel this, there's also a certain amount of unfairness. Not that things should be fair in life, because they're not. But people feel like if you're not in Silicon Valley and you don't know the right people and you're not connected the right way and it's like you're not pitching the right group of people, your odds of success are so low. Why bother? If you're like in Podunk, whatever, and you have no connections, you're not going to be able to compete. And I would say, yes, that is true with startupism, but I don't think that's true with the micro team. How do I know that? Funny little graphic here. This is what it feels. This is what people say, like, well, you can't bootstrap against all these tech companies. It's like this guy on the scooter. Is trying to win the race against the VCs, right? Bootstrap startup competing with VC-backed startups in the same category. It feels like you're up against the odds. But I would say, yes, they have a lot of money, but what are they using that money for? What is the advantage that they get with the money? Well, it used to be that the advantage they get is team size. They just hire a ton of people and they'd swamp the market. Or the other thing they do is they just give away the product, basically because they don't have any pressures to make money. And that would make it impossible for anybody else who's actually trying to sell anything. How can you go up against that? And I think things are changing there too. It's actually harder and harder now to give away your product because everybody's giving away. It's like attention is the hardest thing right now, not price. It's just getting attention is so damn difficult these days. So, what I want to get into ideas, like there's a couple of ideas. I think if I can create an ism for micro teams like this philosophy, I think there's a couple things that come together that we can pull this together and say there is a viable third way here, right? It doesn't say we're not going to raise money. It doesn't say we're going to entirely bootstrap. It doesn't say we're going to, we're going to not do tech or something like that, or we're going to be a small business. It's going to say there is another way to sustainable growth. And so this idea of the micro team, I think, has a bunch of ideas. This is part of the micro team manifesto. You can read the rest of it on scalebrate.com. But the idea is that a micro team is small in size, but mighty in output. And of course, we're going to use all the, we're going to be AI native. We're going to make the use of all the AI tools, all the automation tools, all the leverage, but also scalable systems. This is the things people forget. It's that you're not trying to automate dumb things. You're trying to automate things that work. So the question is, okay, well, what works? So you have to say, well, what works for the big companies? How are the big companies doing their marketing? Like, what is their approach they're using? Like, oh, they're paying for ads. It's like, okay, well, are all those ads effective? No. Which are the ones that are effective? Okay, well, can we basically squeeze the efficiency of the process and then implement that process through automation and AI, and do that with people who extract all the learnings? And here's the great thing about AI. I wrote about this in our Cognilytica piece in a podcast. I call AI the great averager. You may or may not have heard that expression, which is that one of the great things about LLMs is you can ask it any question, and of course it's trained on the internet of data. It's not magic. So what's going to do is it's going to accumulate that and present it to you. But the thing is, what is it presenting? Well, it's basically presenting sort of like the average of what's out there. So my point is like, well, that means you can at least be average. You could be like completely dumb about something, but you can ask an LLM and it'll give you at least what the average is, maybe even slightly better than the average, the best of the average, right? So anybody can be average right now. Anybody could be an average graphic designer or be a poor designer and become an average graphic designer with AI. Anybody could be a poor writer and become at least an average writer with AI. Anybody could be a poor coder and be at least an average coder with AI, right? Maybe even slightly better than average, right? You're not going to be awesome, but you're not going to be an awesome graphic designer or an awesome writer or an awesome coder, but you will at least be average. So let's extend this thought. That means I could be at least an average marketer. I can be an average salesperson. I can be an average operations person. I can be an average finance person. Well, when you're a small team and you're only good at one thing, and AI lets me be at least average at everything else, I'll take that, because then I don't have to hire somebody who may not even be average. Honestly, they could be worse than average. So AI gives me that sort of baseline, right? And a lot of times large organizations, they have a lot of money, but they're not necessarily performing better than average. So, I can get a little, this is what I'm saying. It's not just technology, it's technology and process and insights. Let's pull this all together, right? All right, enough of that. Next thing, of course, is leverage over labor. We talked a little about this. We're not going to hire, if we have a problem, we're like, oh, shoot, we got to do something. The first reflex shouldn't be, let's just hire somebody, let's hire two people, whether it's full-time or contractor, it doesn't really matter, or even a volunteer. We need to think, wait a second, we're in the AI automation age. Let's leverage our way out of this problem. Let's build a workflow instead of a work pile, as I like to call it. Let's scale our output without scaling our overhead, because the more we do, the funny thing is, the more you would do that, it kind of builds upon itself. I'll talk a little bit about that later with scale maxing, which is like anything of value compounds. Like I think it was Warren Buffett said that like the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest or something like that. But it's sort of like, yeah, it's kind of weird how small things add up over time. And sometimes when things compound enough, it's like, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So think about it in terms of processes. It's like, yeah, we don't need everything amazing. Just like build a small process, then build another small process, then build another. Next thing you know, you got something. Third thing is the scale with respect. And this is not just one of those like, oh, that's nice. Ron's talking about respect. That sounds like an oobly goobly, whatever thing. No, I'm talking about like real world. It's like the problem with the startupism is that it burns a lot of people out. It burns out the founders. It burns out the teams. It burns out even customers. When you're churning and all of a sudden you're like, you remember that free plan that we had? Well, now the investors want us to like charge a lot of money for it. Now it's $99. Or remember when you used to have unlimited tokens? Well, I'm sorry, it's now just 100 tokens a month. It's this thing that I think was Dershowitz, not Dershowitz. Somebody talked about the enshittification of the internet, And it's like eventually all systems just decay. Like people give things away, and then they stop giving things away. They make things cheap. They no longer make things cheap. They give more and they start taking away. And people are kind of used to it now. It's like when I see a company get acquired, I'm thinking, oh, well, there goes the thing that I was using. It was fun while it lasted. So we can't be doing that, because if we're a micro team, right, we can't be burning out like the 4 people on our team and the thousands of customers we worked hard for. So we need to focus on how do we maintain this sustainability of growth, so that we don't squeeze customers just to meet some artificial goal that we have. And a lot of the goals really are artificial. Because I said, hey, who here would like to make $5 million a year? Ain't nothing wrong with $5 million a year. I'll make $5 million. You'll take $5 million for everybody. And someone's like, no, you must make 50 million. It's like, why? Do I have to? Well, if you're saying that I can't keep my 5 million because someone's I'll compete with me and my 5 million will eventually become 0 over time, then okay, I'll pay attention to that. But otherwise, that may not necessarily happen. So this kind of goes to the next thing, which is momentum is really a multiplier. It's like a lot of times when you see these runaway successes, and I profiled Gamma in one of our podcasts. I did a podcast and did a newsletter, an Exponential Scale. And Gamma, you may or may not have heard of them, AI-powered presentation company, and they just like hit $100 million in ARR, just raised a huge round. But they actually hit the 100 million before they raised the round. I'll talk about this. They actually were a small team. They were a micro team before they raised the round, something like 20, 30 people. And what they realized is that it's like it seemed like an overnight success, but what was happening was that they were just sort of kind of keeping the momentum wheel going, and that's what ended up working for them. Progress gives you energy, energy gives you momentum, and it's actually momentum that gives you scale, right? It's the little things, when things start compounding on each other so that they're kind of pushing itself, it's like it kind of pushes itself along. That's how you get scale. It's kind of hard to make scale work on its own unless you have a ton of money and you can basically buy the whole industry. But there's arguments that are saying that doesn't actually work anyways. So last little bits here on the Micro Team Manifesto, the community. The community really matters. Again, this is not like oh, that's nice. No, it's like if we're going to be small, we have to work together. Micro teams do not scale alone. We need to collaborate. The more that micro teams, they're $10 million here, 20 million, 50 million, 100, the more that we're working together, the more that we can compete against the $1 billion, $10 million juggernaut in the industry. Collaboration really replaces competition. Even if we're in the same general markets, if there's enough to feed $1 billion giant, there's enough to feed 20, $50 million micro teams. It's the same math, right? The only question is, are there issues of customer preference? Well, that has an issue to do with market segmentation and being niche oriented, et cetera, et cetera. So the biggest way to do this is we're going to share playbooks. Like, hey, here's a marketing playbook that's working for me. That's fully automated. You're starting to already see this. People are posting N8N templates and this and that. That's what they're doing. They're basically showing, here's a process that's working for me. Take it, use it. It's not going to hurt my business. It's just going to help yours. So, no guesswork. I hate the guesswork. And really we celebrate. Celebration is so good. Ooh, sequence stack. I'm gonna take a look at that. Momentum is everything. Great comments. So, but of course, small team size is the strategy. Size is not a constraint, it's a strategy. So the question shouldn't be how big is the team? The question is how much output, how much efficiency, how much effectiveness can we get from this team? When everybody I add is just going to be some multiplied resource. This is why I don't get what the large organizations are doing. They're like, well, we're gonna cut this whole team and we're going to save all this money. It's like, well, you can't cut your way to growth. The real question is, if you could have just gotten 10x the output from those 1,000 people, you might be in a completely different place right now. Instead of thinking, oh, I can save 80, I can cut this team and get 80% of what I need for 20% of the cost. It's like, okay, right. That doesn't bode well, which is the other reason why I think there's a huge opportunity now, because I think all these companies, all they're doing is just creating a ton of competition and ton of opportunity for a lot of people to go in there, because they're not thinking about growth. They're thinking about sort of maintaining their own capabilities. So, and of course, I think the micro teams is a new era. I don't think it's a trend. I think this is a correction of decades of inefficiency. I think the startup wave, strangely enough, was actually a big inefficient wave. I think throwing billions and billions of dollars at companies who haven't yet proven a market, that might be great for investors who are trying to flip the company shares, because that's what it was a financial hustle. I shouldn't use it in the past tense. That's what it is. It's a financial hustle. But for the companies themselves, it's a very inefficient way of actually capturing market share. And that's the chatter we're hearing right now in the stock market about all these concerns about NVIDIA and all these companies, right? I'm sure you've heard this before. There was something, Jensen Huang on his most recent NVIDIA quarterly announcement, he was very nervous, and you can actually see comments from him. He's actually feeling very nervous right now, even though he's on the top of the world, because he's saying two things. One, he goes, if we show 1 quarter of bad results, it will tank the entire stock market. So they are under intense pressure right now to, hey, Brendan, thank you for being here. They're under intense pressure to show results over and over. He goes, we don't know if we can sustain that. The second thing was this comment that he made that between $3 trillion and $4 trillion will be spent on an AI infrastructure over the next 2 years. And it's actually hard to fathom what that money means. But a BlackRock analyst said, like, wait a second. That means that if you guys do $100 billion in annual revenue, which is a lot, it will take you 30 years to make up that investment. He goes, or 40 years. He goes, wait a second here. $100 billion a year in revenue won't even make up the next 2 years in investment, because you have to spend, it may not be possible. Basically, we may be investing here and we may never see that return in these measures of revenue, or even stock value. So what's going on? Very good question. Very good question. It's like, basically it's overinvest. I don't really know. I mean, it's hard to say what's going to happen here. Everybody uses AI. I mean, people are using AI, so it's not like the blockchain or something, which maybe not everybody's using. So this is we're at a critical moment, I think, for the whole industry. So you might be saying, wait a second here, Ron, this micro team thing, that sounds good. I need some proof. Tell me about it. Is this actual real? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I just said Gamma hit $100 million in recurring revenue with only a few dozen people before they even raised their round. Okay, and you're going to look at me sideways. And I say this, OnlyFans. Okay, yeah, am I talking about OnlyFans? Yeah, OnlyFans, 42 people, $1.3 billion in revenue. And they hit over $150 million in revenue with less than 20 people. And it's like, well, that's because they're in the smut industry. Well, that's not actually how they started, by the way. But okay, so what? They're scaling. They're not even able to raise money. It doesn't even matter because they're scaling anyways. Okay, let's skip that and let's take a look at Stardew Valley. You guys know them? Maybe not. It's a gaming company. Less than 6 people, $580 million in revenue. It was just one person for a long time. You might think, oh, that's just gaming. I'm like, okay, so I got software. I have, community, if you wanted to call it that way. And you have gaming. They're making money. Like, okay, well, I need, look at me with the side eye. It's like, I need more proof. It's like, okay, well, I can go back. I can say, do you remember Craigslist? They're making $600 million a year, 18 people. They never raised a round. How about Rovio, the Angry Birds folks? 12 people, 70 million. How about Balsamic? That was one person, $5 million. They are lovable. You might say, oh, they're a big venture capital. It's like, well, they weren't in the beginning. There was $17 million in revenue before they even raised their round. Plenty of Fish. Remember those guys? One person, 10 million. So there is a proven, there is this other model. It's like, wait, these guys are not following the startup model. They're able to scale to high growth. They're able to squeeze efficiency. They're not hiring a ton of people. Lots of content companies are able to do this too. I don't want to tell you how much money Mr. Beast is making. Mr. Beast is a tiny company, 30, 40 people. They're making $40, $50 million a year. How the hell are they doing it, right? So so the two things is like, one, there is no limit on scale for being small. It just has to do with, you have to adopt the right model. You have to adopt the right business model. You have to act as if you're large, but not fake it till you make it, by basically adopting the patterns of large companies, but using the efficiency of a small business. So if you want to hear more of those stories, this is what I'm doing in an exponential scale. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but this is what I'm covering in my newsletter. This is what I'm covering in the podcast. I want to spend more time talking with you, so I want to be mindful of the slides here. But also there's this. This is what's getting everybody thinking. So Sam Altman said this. He said, we will see a one-person billion-dollar company. So he's just throwing it out there. Like, okay, what does that mean? people saying, oh, that means like, well, no, actually, what does that mean? Because does he mean a venture-backed one-person billion-dollar company? In which case, what is the venture invest? Like, what are you using the venture money for? If you're just going to be one person, like, what exactly are you going to use all that? So maybe he doesn't mean venture-backed. Maybe he means bootstrapped. But then again, it's like $1 billion what? $1 billion in value or $1 billion in revenue? Because that's a big difference, right? Between 1 billion. And the reason why I know this is because one of the co-founders of OpenAI, Mira Murati, who was the CTO, she left OpenAI and she started a new company, which nobody has any idea what they're doing, and raised $2.5 billion before they had anything. So this goes to the startupism. They have no business model. It's just a financial hustle. It's just they know that it's Mira Murati and she was the CTO of OpenAI. Whatever she's going to do is going to be worth something. It doesn't matter if they have a product, they don't have a product, they have customers, they don't have customers, they have revenue, they don't have revenue. It doesn't matter. $2.5 billion in means $8 billion out. I mean, it's got to mean something. $25 billion out. I mean, who knows? It's a hustle. It's a hustle. So if Sam Altman was really serious, he'd be talking about micro teams. He's like, we will see millions of companies getting started that are based on AI who are all creating sustainable large businesses. I don't want to see one person billion-dollar company. I want to see a million million-dollar companies. I know that adds up to $1 trillion. It's not quite a billion, but still. So this was that idea of scale maxing. Yeah, remember when everything was blockchain? I do remember that. Scale maxing is this idea, like what you were talking about, Patrick, which is how do we squeeze all the juice that we can out of everything that we're doing? And of course, it comes to those 5 laws. 1, we need technology. We need AI. We need automation. It comes without saying. We got to use it. We can't be AI stupid, right? So if we're going to be a micro team in this current future, you better be like the best at making use of all these tools. And the things are, these tools are changing all the time. So that means it means constant learning, but it also means constant sharing. As I said, collaboration. You're doing something, share with me what you're doing. I'll share with you what I'm doing, because tomorrow it might be something else. So let's keep each other on our toes, right? The second thing is we need repeatable processes. If we are doing something from scratch every single time, we are so inefficient. And as I mentioned, to be an effective micro team, we need to be hyper efficient. So that means if we do something, I just had an interview with the CEO of Make, Fabian Veit, and he goes, our rule is do, automate. So if you do it once, that's okay. If you do it twice, okay, but you shouldn't do it a third time. If you're doing the same thing a third time, it needs to be automated in some way. So you need to create a system that creates consistency, and consistency will create scale because of momentum, right? And that third thing is mastering time. It turns out that the most critical resource really isn't money, and the most critical resource really isn't people. The most critical resource is actually time. That's the one thing we really can't buy more of. And I would make the argument that the reason why people hire employees is because they're basically trying to create time, because they're saying, I don't have enough time to do something, or we don't have enough capability. So what we'll do is we'll just add more people and we'll use their time and we'll pay them for their time. In exchange for paying for them for their time, we'll get their outputs. So the way for us to get more outputs from a limited amount of time is by hiring more people. But there's other ways of making the most of time. And so what we need to do is figure out, like, how can I multiply every hour, every minute? You know, what rhythms and rituals can I do? I know it seems very hoobly-goobly, but it's not. Like, they're like, what actual rhythms can I create? And what sort of, like, you know, specific things do I need to do so that I can keep the scale pace going without burning out, without overdoing things, just by basically just becoming more and more efficient over time. And as momentum is multiplicative. Small wins do compound. Little things grow over time. And momentum really beats motivation, because what happens is that it's very hard to sustain motivation. I have a whole thing on the Exponential Scale podcast where we talk about the micro team journey. And when you start anything, you feel so excited and you feel so, like, emotionally, you know, energized, right? I call it the spark, right? You know, you're going up it's a roller coaster. So you're kind of going up the roller coaster. It's like click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, right? You have this anticipation. It's like you haven't quite taken that first hill yet. You're just getting all psyched up, right, for the ride. And then, of course, what happens is that after you cross the peak, it's sort of like this is the grind. This is where the start of grind. The grind happens. Is like, Now you have to actually do the thing that you were so excited about, and then you're running into like a whole lot of people saying no, and things not working, and what you thought was going to happen was not going to happen, so you get disappointed. And what happens is people lose that motivational spark, and then what happens is they start going into like, well, maybe I'll pivot, maybe I'll do this. And what they're doing with pivoting is they're trying to claim the spark back. They're trying to get that energy. They're like, remember how I felt about doing something new? That was fun. I loved that. And then they forget about the grind part. They forget about the second part. So yeah, micro momentum really helps here. So the way you do it is you have to know that there's something that comes after the grind. The thing that comes after the grind is the plateau, when you like realize, oh, we got something that works. It hasn't scaled yet, but we got something that works. So the question is, how can you get through that grind to that plateau? But the plateau is not the scale part. What happens once you get to plateau, you figure out what the real breakthrough is. You get to the breakthrough, and then you become like Canva.com. I'm sure you've heard that story. Melanie Perkins, she started Canva way back and had like very little support and wasn't getting anywhere for like years, but she stuck with it. And then, eventually, if you're doing things right and you're listening and you're iterating, you're not staying still. You're on a roller coaster. You're moving. The idea is that if you're not staying still, if you're listening, eventually things will click, and then the breakthrough will happen. Then you'll get the scale. So the last little bit of this is that I think in order to keep that spark, in order to keep the momentum, you really need to harness the energy of others. One, you're a small team, so you don't have a lot of people anyways. So we need to work with others because that's how we multiply. How can you multiply your team without actually hiring more people? The answer is work with other people, right? Partnerships, collaboration, community, extended teams, symbiotic relationships, synergistic relationships. If I was thinking about innovation here in Maryland, and like the thing that would make it like totally awesome would be a great synergistic, or it's not like, yeah, we're all working together in the same state, we happen to be together, we're all working on things. It's like, no, it's like, how can my momentum help your momentum? How can your momentum help my momentum? How can what I'm doing kind of tip you off, like, oh, there's something happening here, and how can we sort of feed off each other? It's that feedback cycle. That's fantastic. That does happen to some extent in Silicon Valley, but I think Silicon Valley is much more exclusionary. It's hard to be in those winning. If you're in the right circle, yeah, these people will all help each other out. That's what they do. But if you're not in that circle, you're not going to get any of that help. And I think that's part of what makes Silicon Valley Silicon Valley. And I think that sort of mentality can happen anywhere. It's just you need to have a reinforcing group that all feels like they all win when we all win, instead of like, I win, you lose, that kind of situation or whatever. Anyway, I can go on to that for hours, but we won't. So anyway, there's so much more. I mean, this is sort of the movement I'm talking about. That little picture on the bottom left, that's the emotional journey, a roller coaster of the micro team founder. I have a whole article about that. I have a whole podcast about that. The middle thing, I talk about being T-shaped, which is basically, if you're really good at your business, that means you're probably not going to be good at other things. I don't know if you guys have heard of T-shaped skills, but this idea of you need to sort of figure out how to build the breadth while staying depth focused. There's no way you could be an expert at everything. It's just impossible. And what the two excuses people usually have are, one, well, I'll hire my way out of that problem. I'm not a good marketer, so I'll hire a good marketer. That might be good, but the problem is that now all you've done is you've just shifted the T skills to someone else. Like, well, I hope they're really good at that one depth, but they're not good at the other thing. So you kind of end up building sort of this. And if the depth isn't that good anyways, it's kind of not so great. So you need to figure out how do you build effective T-shaped skills. And then that right thing, it's kind of funny. That was like somebody was on one of those slings and they hit a bird on the way up. And this idea of like, this is sort of what it feels like to be like in this like, hyperscale company, and you don't want to be out of control. And so it's scaling with control that works. So anyway, join me on this journey. I mean, so Scalebrate, the company that I started, Scalebrate.com, you can see it's celebrate and scale kind of goes together. Is this idea of I'm building a community of other people who are building these hyperscale micro teams, who are intentionally trying to do it this way. Right now it's content. The next thing coming up very soon is an actual community hub. Probably put it on school.com where you can, we can share, hey, here's a template I've got, here's a chat. That's a monetized thing. I want to make sure that I don't just have people who are not doing anything. So there's a community there. And then the third thing will be some agents and some tools to help us do what we do better.